keep this party going. Let's get this thing installed. Let's go. Back in 2017, I began a full restoration of my 96 Bayliner by tearing it apart all the way down to the hull. From there, I began the rebuilding process, which included learning to fiberglass, rebuilding an engine and Outdrive, learning to fair and paint, and even upholstery. Now, I've bought a 28-foot cabin cruiser, and I'm starting all over. Welcome, my name's Jared. Now get ready, because it's going to be a ship show. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jared, and in this episode, we are going to continue this assembly party and get this Outdrive slapped in. Never thought this day would come, that the motor would be in and the Outdrive would be on. Hope I didn't jinx myself, but let's start the process of getting this thing back on there. Okay, so before we can really get started with really just slapping this stuff together, there's a few things that need to be done first. One of those is ensure your drive, if it's not already, is in neutral. That'll set the shift cable at the correct depth. So that has been done. Obviously all the other stuff with the gimbal housing assembly and all that was done previously in videos, and the rehab of the Bravo drive as well. So that stuff in theory is all ready to go. The engine is aligned. So step one is going to be, we're going to go ahead and grease the studs. So just get a little bit of coating of grease on here. That'll help with prevent corrosion and just kind of ease assembly, things like that. Keep the threads from galling. So we're gonna grease the threads, and then we're also going to grease the splines on the input shaft. So just make sure that's taken care of. So let's do that first. Okay, splines are good. Let's get these studs. And actually, this is more of a high performance, high pressure grease. That's why I use that on the splines. But for the studs, I'm actually going to use just my regular waterproof, like wheel bearing grease, because obviously it's going to get some water exposure. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do with grease, and this actually isn't in the manual, but I like to do this, and that is spread a small amount of grease along the inside surface of the bellows where the metal ring is, because on a Bravo drive, that's actually the water seal to keep water out of the U-joint bellows. So if there's any small nicks or imperfections in there, just a small slather of grease will help kind of act as a little bit of a liquid gasket, if you will. So, and obviously if your bellows and all that kind of stuff is not new, you'll want to inspect that surface on both the bellows itself and the drive, the face of the drive, and make sure it's smooth and there's no nicks that water could find its way through. And hopefully you can see this, but I'm also going to put a little bit of grease under the shift slide here to make sure it can slide in and out smoothly. Okay, so these next steps, I'm going to try and get you in here nice and close so you can see what's going on. And that is to effectively glue on a couple of O-rings. So we have this O-ring here, which goes around the circle there to seal off the water, or the shift cable rather. There is sort of this goofy looking one that goes here to seal off the water pickup area. I like to use bellows adhesive to glue those in place just to prevent them from falling out. I got my bellows adhesive here, so we are going to do that real quick. Okay, that is those two installed. And now back on the bell housing, we have a small O-ring that goes around where the oil drive lube fitting is. Let's get that one glued in place as well. Okay, so I'm gonna let those set up for a couple of minutes and we'll keep moving. So all those O-rings cure with the bellows adhesive, let's go ahead and get the O-rings installed on the input shaft. So first one we do is kind of so you have two sort of identical ones. Is this in focus? You got like two identical, like thinner ones, and you have one that's a little bit thicker material. Kind of go in order as they get towards the end. So first one we're going to put on is the thicker one. That should pop right into that groove there. And the reason you want to do this one first is because now that'll keep the other O-rings from falling in the groove, obviously. So next. Okay. There we go. I'm just going to take a little bit of this grease from the splines and cover the O-rings, make sure they're not dry. All right, so those O-rings should be cured up enough with that bellows adhesive. So I'm going to go ahead, take some of my waterproof grease here and just do a light coat on all the O-rings. Make sure they're nice and lubricated. prevents them from sticking and also just kind of aids in sealing a little bit. And in the off chance the bellows adhesive doesn't do the job, just a little bit of grease will actually also act as a little bit of like a glue. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, this is kind of the moment of truth. Now, without the prop on, it's going to be tough to spin this, but at 9 times out of 10, the input shaft needs to spin a little bit just to align with the splines in the coupler. So I'm going to have to go find the prop to throw on there so I can spin it. Be right back. All right, so I got one of my disgustingly dirty props on here, but enough that I should be able to spin the input shaft just enough, so let's give that a shot. All right, I think I felt something there, so let's give it a shot. Okay. Seems to be happening. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because this is a very important part that I want to make sure I'm not screwing up. And if you can see this, try and get you zoomed in here. That little guy there is your shift cable. That needs to fall into the shift linkage. Okay, so I'm going to very carefully try and inch this forward. Man, that's close. But I think you can see, there we go. Yep, that's in now. Oh, the bottom of the boat and the bottom of the drive is just a little low. It's kind of fighting me on the angle here. There we go. Okay. Hell yeah, man. That's cool. Okay, so next step is get the 6 nuts on. Oh, and if you didn't, probably heard a bunch of weird grunt noises and stuff there when I was showing the shift cable, but basically I pulled the drive stand out, let it drop down and align better with the bell housing because it's kind of, if you can see that they're kind of like at an angle to each other. And I think that was fighting me, but as soon as I pulled that drive out and was able to drop down a little bit, pretty much went right in. So let's get these nuts on. Is there supposed to be washers here? I feel like there is. Something doesn't seem right. Go look in my pile because I feel like there should be washers on there. Had a little bit of a panicky moment there. Couldn't find those washers anywhere. I mean, I looked all over the place. Coincidentally, I apparently stuck them on the pins for the trim rims. I'm guessing when I took all this stuff off almost 2 years ago, I was cleaning up and it was like, oh, washers, they must go on there. I was about to be pretty mad and have to order stuff and pause again, but let's keep moving. Got the washers on. We're just going to go ahead and go around, tighten this thing evenly, kind of like you're putting on a tire on a car. Okay, that's all them pretty evenly hand tight. So now I got to go get the torque wrench and we will torque these to 50 foot-pounds. All right, got Mr. Torquey set to 50 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and get these 6 tightened up. All right, so before we jump into the next bit here, just kind of funny story. I had a major panic moment last night. I thought there's something seriously wrong with the drive. I couldn't really wrap my head around what was going on, but when you're done installing the drive like I did here, you want to take the prop and make sure that you can still free spin it in both directions, kind of like this, if you can see that. And basically what that's doing is just checking to ensure that the drive is still in neutral, that nothing weird happened with the shift cable when you assembled it, and that the shift cable is in the correct position. So that's just to verify those things. So obviously I went to go do that and I could not get this thing to move either direction. Like I was pulling pretty hard on it and nothing. So kind of panicked, like I said, and I ended up having to take the drive completely off again. Basically what I found out is it was I think, well, knock on wood, it's not wood, but I took a long pry bar in the U-joint yoke and just kind of started to turn it, and it just started spinning all of a sudden. I think what happened is this thing basically sat for 2 years without spinning, and I think it just kind of got sticky, essentially. No oil in there, so it's not going to be like rusty or anything, but I'm thinking and hoping that that's just what happened. So it's moving freely now, so I'm feeling better about it. But yeah, I was freaked out there for a minute, so I think we're good to go. I actually didn't show this, but I actually popped this rear cover off thinking maybe the ball detent in here was screwed up in the shift mechanism. Turned out that everything in there looks almost immaculate. A lot of times this lower cavity where the ball detent goes in the shift mechanism can be rusty because if the seals fail, you get water in there, things like that. And it looked absolutely pristine, so that's good. Now the downside is now I have a ball detent and gasket on its way in the mail because I thought I was going to have to replace that, but I'll just throw those in the spare parts bin. Okay, that whole spiel out of the way. Let's keep moving on here. So next thing I need to do is install the trim rams and get the hydraulic hoses run to the distribution block underneath. So got them sitting here behind me. Everything should be ready to go, so let's get these trim rams installed. I didn't think about that. So I'm gonna have to get some kitty litter. Okay, so we're just basically tightening these lock nuts till they're completely tight against the shoulder. So I double checked myself, this is all correct, but you can see this. There's almost zero gap between the head of that bolt for the continuity wire and the bell housing. Or I guess that's the gimbal ring. I don't love that. I mean, this end of the trim rims doesn't really move a whole lot, but man, that is like basically no gap. But I don't know what else to do because that's all correct. All right, so trying to get you in close here for this this next part, and this next part is installing the trim ram hoses. I'm going to, as usual, do a little bit of thread sealant to form a gasket on here, which technically isn't needed because it's a flare fitting, so it's not really needed for sealing, but it is going to help prevent corrosion in these threads, which can be a huge deal if you've ever had to remove these hoses on your boat. So the up and out hose, which is the one in my hand here, goes to the rear port. So we're going to make sure we get this started by hand because we don't want to cross thread this. Okay, and we got our flare nut wrench here, which apparently is not 7/16, must be 3/8. This is probably going to be slow going because not a lot of range of movement here. All right, so this one on the right's a little bit goofy in that the section of hard line is so short I can't fit this flare nut wrench up in that area, so I had to use a regular one there, just being careful. So these are officially tightened to 28.765 Newton meter feet per second squared. So let's go ahead and get the other side. Okay, that's this side tightened to 27.5 kilowatts per gallon. All right, so for those of you that have been following along with the build, it's the first time I've had a start battery in here since I completely rewired everything. So we're not only installing the drive in this episode, we're going to be testing some stuff for the first time. So let's pray for no smoke. So far, so good. All right, so far, no fires in the engine compartment. Don't smell any smoke, so it's a good start. Now, I had to put that start battery in because we need to bleed the air out of the trim system. So there's technically two ways you can do this. What I'm going to do is sort of the one-person method, and it's a little questionable because if there's a small amount of air in the system, like if you were to disconnect a hose and lose a little bit of fluid or something like that, the method I'm going to do would be perfectly acceptable. Now, if you completely drain the system, rebuild the cylinders, there's no oil in there, you didn't fill them before you put it back together. If it's basically just pure air, what you're supposed to do is basically remove certain hoses, run the trim up, put hoses back on, remove the other hoses, run the trim down. It's kind of this whole convoluted procedure, which unless you have multiple people watching the lines as you run the trim up and down, it's kind of complicated. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I've done it before. Even with fully rebuilt trim cylinders, I've done this and it works. So I'm going to run the trim up and down several times, keeping an eye on the fluid in the trim pump. When you do this, it's going to get a lot of air in it. You're going to get a lot of foam, so you're going to have to let the foam settle, let the bubbles pop. And then when they do, check the level, top it off, and just keep doing that until you get no more air in the oil. So that is the plan. Let me go get some oil for the trim pump, and hopefully the trim pump and trim system works, because again, this is the first time I'm testing any of this. Okay, so I ran the trim all the way up and down a couple of times. I had to add some oil to it as I went, but it's built up a lot of air bubbles in it, some foam, which is normal, it's expected. It's just the air bleeding out of the system. So while I let that oil sit and that foam kind of dissipate and the bubbles pop, I'm going to work on getting the continuity wires from the trim rams hooked up to the underside here. So let's do that real quick. Alright guys, that is officially going to wrap up the drive install video. That is, again, I keep saying this, but a huge milestone and a huge thing to check off the list. So that is super exciting. Now I still need to get the bearing carrier taken care of, and we'll do that in the next video. But for now, the drive is effectively ready to go. So anyways, like I said, that's going to wrap it up for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, all that fun stuff. And until the next one, thanks for watching.